Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or a loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
All right, hello, welcome to That's Enough Out of You. I am your host, the main host of this fine podcast program, Bill Rader, and joining me, my co-host, Sean Kane. Sean, what's going on today? How are you?
Well, some might call me a pompous ass, Bill, but I'm here, buddy.
Among other things, right?
Yeah, that's one of the nicer things, but hey.
Well, we've been called worse.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, much worse. So, Sean, before we get into our topic today, we got a few things. Obviously, our Patreon, we want to make sure people know that if you go to Patreon and look for us, search for That's Enough Out of You, you're going to find our Patreon site, our page, where we offer lots and lots and lots of cool stuff. Sean, you post articles there probably at least one a day, maybe more than that.
I usually try to put 2 or 3 a day, Bill, if possible. And Bill, that generates a lot of discussion from the great community we have there, which includes a lot of authors that we had on our show.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Linda Zambonini's on there, Lisa Pease is on there, Paul Abbott, Dave Whelan. So, and a lot of the great, Dan Hankey's always commenting on there, Jim Richmond, a lot of great comments, Bill. And we're getting new subscribers, Bill, that are getting involved. So it's a really good community.
And then, of course, if you sign up on our Patreon on a paid level, and that could be as little as $1 a month, or it could be as much as you have available to spare on a monthly basis. But it could be, like I said, as little as $1 a month. We do an extra show every week called the Speakeasy, where it's a little bit different than this show that you have on YouTube and the podcast channels. Basically, our Speakeasy is kind of us just talking about current events, talking about politics, which we try to steer clear of on this on this program, but don't always.
Well, I will say most of the articles I put on are for the paid subscribers, though.
Okay.
Most of them are not available to the free subscribers. Once in a while, I'll put out a free one. Usually, it's just mostly information on what's coming up and stuff, but the real in-depth articles that I put out there for paid subscribers.
Okay. And we've had we've also on Speakeasy, we've had some guests that I think have been very interesting, that would be worth the price of admission alone. So
yeah, Chris Kelly was our latest.
Chris Kelly, we've had some folks that we've had on. We've had some Patreons on folks.
Sure. Dan Hankey was on, Jim Richmond,
Mike Pilch,
Lisa Pease. Yeah, Mike Pilch was on, Dave Whelan, Scranton Dave.
That's right. So
get Scranton Dave back.
That's right. We have to get him back, especially now.
Yeah.
But anyway, check out our Patreon. It's definitely worth it just to go on there and see what's available. And again, no pressure, but you could always subscribe for a couple bucks a month. And then make sure you like and subscribe to this channel as well, because the more that you do that, the more that we're going to have, the more we're going to be up there in the algorithm, and people will find us more and more. So comment, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And we appreciate it. We appreciate all the support. Sean, it's been, we're in our 4th season now, which I can't believe. Yeah. But we are two guys.
Podcast stop after 7 episodes, Bill. They fail, and that's it.
I have
amazing. We're going.
Two guys who had absolutely no idea what they were doing and somehow we keep going. But anyway, Sean, we got a great topic this week. We've had some really great topics over the last few weeks, and I know, Sean, these have been kind of building on each other.
Sure.
You've really set this up so that, you know, if it's almost like a prerequisite. You have to go back and watch the previous episodes, and then you know, get to this one. So, Sean, why don't you start us off?
Well, the episode we have with James Day is kind of like, you know, sets this up really good. And it's going to be on Sam Giancana. And it's really a focus, Bill. We're not going to rehash a lot of the stuff because we talked about Giancana a lot. It's going to be really the focus of his time in Mexico, in that town he was in, Cuernavaca, and, you know, how important that is to the big picture. And then we're going to talk a lot about Old Man Kennedy. So I just want to say, Bill, did a ton of research on this. A lot of the sources I used, of course, Jim DiEugenio's great books. I used a lot of documents, declassified documents. Bill Romer, the FBI who was in charge of the Chicago Outfit Task Force. I used him, Bill, but I used the source I used was directly him. Like, because a lot of the information people use for him comes from other sources. Like they say, Bill Romer said this. I directly sourced everything from Bill Romer because there's too much attributed to him that I couldn't find that he said. Somebody else said he said it, and we're not going to get into that crap. I also used the Chicago Tribune, obviously. And I take that, you know, I double check everything when it comes from the mainstream, Bill. You know how that goes. And then the sources I really use, Bill, especially on the Old Man Kennedy stuff, and we're going to talk a little bit about a character we already talked about, Daniel Joseph Kennedy. I used Ellen Lawson, a Canadian journalist, Jason Vanderhill is a Canadian author, and Stephen Schneider is a Canadian author. And I also used a lot of Canadian newspapers and stuff. So a lot of research went into this, Bill. But let's get into it. So Sam Giancana, Bill, a lot of myths about him. You know, who was he? Early life, Bill, the family immigrates from Sicily, moves to Chicago in what's called the Patch section. He's born in 1908. Okay. His mother died when he was 2. And then his dad remarried twice. And they had 8 kids. And his stepdad was physically abusive to Giancana, which doesn't excuse what he's going to later do in his life, but it does add to, you know, explain the rage that he had, because everything we say about him, the one thing you can't deny is how violent he was on the streets. He was a violent guy.
Yeah.
So at a young age, he's in trouble. You know, he joins what's called the 42 gang, which is like a gang of teenagers. They were doing work for Cosa Nostra and for gangsters like Al Capone and stuff. But they were small time. They were just a teenage gang. Eventually, he would catch the eye of Cosa Nostra, and he would end up joining. He became, his reputation started as a getaway driver. Basically, that was his claim to fame. And he's made in the late 30s is when he really becomes a member of Cosa Nostra. So it's after Prohibition, Bill. So that's the key to understand. During Prohibition, he's really a young guy, just a young kid, still involved in the 42 gang. He's not really a major player. And this is where a lot of people who have a narrative to tell a story and try to make a phony relationship between him and Old Man Kennedy build him up to be a major player with Al Capone. And he wasn't at the time, Bill. Okay? So he started working for bootleggers. He actually started with the Jenna brothers in the Roaring 20s, and they were a rival of the Capone gang. Then he became a driver, eventually became a driver for the Capone gang, but a lot of people have him directly driving Al around. And I could never find any documentation on that. Al was very close to guys like Tony Accardo, Frankie Rio. Those are the guys that would be next to Capone, Frank Nitti. It wasn't Giancana. So he was a low-level driver. The outfit eventually takes over Chicago. We talked about this after Capone goes to jail.
Right.
That's really when it becomes a Cosa Nostra family, because Capone was the head of the South Side gang. He goes to jail in 1931, and then that's where Paul Ricca and Tony Accardo takes over. And Accardo would eventually run the outfit for 50 years, Bill. Now, Paul Ricca loves Sam Giancana. He's seen something in him. He's seen that violent strength. They could use him. Tony Accardo hated Giancana. And that's something that a lot of people leave out. in the stories they tell, he never trusted Giancana. He never liked him. He never saw, value in him until he started making some money. And then you know how it works with these guys, Bill. Once you give them money, they kind of ignore all your faults,
Yeah.
So Sam's in trouble. He goes to jail. In jail, he meets a guy by the name of Billy Skidmore, who's a in and out of jail guy. He introduces him to Eddie Jones. Eddie Jones was a black gangster, ran the black neighborhoods in the south side of Chicago. And the one thing he had, Bill, is he ran a lottery, and it was a huge lottery in the black communities, and they were making, Bill, like 15,000 a day. And this is in 1940, Bill. They're making that kind of money. So what Jones does is he makes a mistake because he trusts Sam Giancana. They served time together. He gets out and he thinks he could trust him, but it's a big mistake. Giancana ends up kidnapping Eddie Jones, threatens to kill him unless he gives him the lottery racket. And then he said, "I'll give you a little piece, and you go away to Mexico, and I take everything over." And that's what happens. So now all of a sudden, Giancana is useful to the outfit. Tony Accardo ignores all the stuff that he hated about Giancana and lets him into the outfit because they're making huge money, Bill. And now Accardo starts to see him as an earner, and then he also sees him as violent. But we talked about that story where, there was an informant by the name of Action Jackson. There was no real evidence he was an informant. They thought he was. So Giancana and a guy we're going to talk about, Mad Dog Destefano, we're going to talk about him later, one of the craziest gangsters in the history of organized crime. They take this guy and they put him on a meat hook, Bill. He was like 450 pounds. And they hung him on a meat hook and they hit him with like electric cattle prod. They tortured him for days.
Oh my God.
The most vicious hits in the history of organized crime in America. Eventually the guy his heart just stopped after being tortured for 3 days. But that's where Giancana made his reputation as on the street. So what happens, Bill, is in 1955, Accardo and Rica make Giancana the front boss. Now, this is where a lot of authors, Bill, they'll say, well, Accardo and Rica kind of retired, let Giancana take over. But then they'll still acknowledge that every major decision has to be made by Accardo and Rica, and Giancana has to get their approval. Well, then he's not the boss.
Right.
You can't portray him as this boss that's running America when he's not even running his own city. See what I'm saying? Like, you can't, like, he's a front boss, Bill. That's the definition of a front boss. So and Accardo would do that his entire career. So then, we have all these other things that we talked about. Giancana was at a meeting in Appalachian. The Kavarver Committee, we talked about that with Steve Kopesky. You had the McClellan Committee where the Kennedys are really hammering organized crime. And two of the guys they went after the most is Jimmy Hoffa and, of course, Sam Giancana. And you had that confrontation with RFK and Sam Giancana where he kept taking a fifth. And then when he smirked or something, and Bobby Kennedy says something to him like, "I thought only little girls smirk like that, Giancana." And that's where the rivalry came. So all this happens, Bill, before JFK is elected. So that's important to understand. Sam Giancana has a deep hatred for the Kennedys. So we're going to talk about that election crap later on. It makes zero sense when you understand the hatred that they had for each other. So then we get into the Castro plots, Bill. And I know we're speeding up here, but we're not going to rehash stuff that we already talked about. We did so many previous episodes on this stuff. People could go back and see it.
Yep.
But the Castro plots, Bill, documentation, the important thing to understand is, and we talk about this all the time, it started under President Eisenhower. Okay, it didn't start under Kennedy. And then the Kennedys will later find out about that. We know that because we talked about that Robert Mayhew's guys got caught bugging Sam Giancana's girlfriend, the person she was cheating with, the hotel, and that whole nonsense. And that's how the Kennedys found out about it. They never approved these plots. And the important thing to understand is Giancana was brought into the plots by Johnny Roselli. And the documents make it clear everything flows through Roselli. Giancana's only role was to bring in Trafficante. Okay. And then phase two of the Castro plots is really Roselli and Harvey. And Giancana's phased out of those plots. He's not in phase two of the plot. So you have to start to focus on later on what would happen to Giancana, what would be the real threat to the CIA with Giancana, because his involvement in the Castro plots is is pretty limited. Okay, so and we know the whole thing with the Inspector General report from the CIA proved that the Kennedys didn't know about the Castro plots. They want them shut down. We know they continued. Okay, so now here's the thing, Bill. When Kennedy's assassinated in 1963, there was a documentary, The Making of the Mob. Do you remember that, Bill? They did Chicago and they did
Yes.
New York.
Yep.
They did Chicago. They made the claim that Accardo was going to hit Sam Giancana in November '63, and then he called it off because Kennedy was hit and there was too much profile. It was too high profile. They couldn't afford to. And to me, I started investigating that. That looks like it makes a lot of sense. Bill Romer, his investigation, because remember, he's got the outfit under 24/7 surveillance, audio and visual. They're watching these guys. And it started to become a problem because Giancana was so Bobby Kennedy's FBI had the FBI after him so much. They were following him into the bathroom, Bill. They were following him everywhere. And the outfit guys were getting worried about Giancana because they said he was making them nuts. And this is very disturbing to Tony Accardo, who doesn't want this kind of attention. And then I'm going to read something that Bill Romer, this is exact words that Romer said. So Giancana is at the airport because he did a lot of traveling. He traveled to Vegas. And he's coming back from Vegas, and Bill Romer calls him out, and he called the press there, Bill, at the airport, O'Hare in Chicago, and he says, here's what he said: all you folks come over here. I want you to see this. Take a look at this piece of slime. This is Sam Giancana, the boss of the underworld in Chicago. Take a look at that piece of garbage, the big boss over there. You people are lucky. You're just passing through Chicago. We got to live with this jerk. Now, Romer really pushed Giancana's buttons. He really, really pushed his buttons. And this is where he's acting crazy, Bill. And I think there's a lot to it that Accardo had enough. And he sees Giancana as a liability. But what happens is the Kennedy is hit, which proves they had nothing to do with the Kennedy assassination. So what he does is he makes Giancana go to jail. He goes to jail, and this is an old trick, Bill. Al Capone did this when he was feuding with Bugs Moran. They told Al, you got to go to jail. He gets picked up on a phony gun charge, does some time just to get him off the streets. So Giancana goes to jail. And when he comes out, Bill, in 1966, Accardo basically sends him to Mexico. He kind of bans him. He says he didn't want to kill him now because he still didn't want any heat. And he bans him to Mexico. And Sam agrees to go. Now, you have to understand, Mexico, they did have some operations, the outfit running through Mexico, but it was not a huge operation at this point. And what happens is Sam Giancana takes Richard Kane with him, Bill. Now, Richard Kane, we talked about on the Roselli episode, law enforcement background, ties to intelligence. He had ties to the Giancana family, ties to the outfit. He's really, he dies in that suspicious window of deaths in the 70s. And he sets up an investigative agency in Mexico, which, kind of like Bob Mayhew does in the States. And this is where Giancana and Richard Kane set up this huge drug and gambling empire in Mexico, Bill. And he's in this town in Cuernavaca, Mexico. And we talked to James Day about this, where all these elitists kind of control this town. D.H. Byrd had a lot of ties there. The intelligence community has, the spectrum of the intelligence is all over this little town. And here's Giancana right there. This is where he's banned to. This is where he forms this huge empire. So I want to talk about that, Bill. But did you have anything before I get on to this?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so Sam Giancana and Richard Kane set up this huge empire. And what they did, Bill, they set up gambling casinos on cruise ships in the Caribbean. And even one in Iran, Bill, if you could believe that. And the whole thing, Bill, financially was run by this, I don't even want to call him a Jewish gangster. He's really a businessman, finance guy with ties to intelligence. His name is Hyman Larner, and you probably never heard of him. But he's a very important name because he's going to be the guy running all the money behind the scenes. And he's got ties to Meyer Lansky too, which is important. And he helps Giancana with the gambling operations setting up, and also with smuggling operations, Bill. And of course, when we're talking smuggling, what are we talking about? We're talking about drugs.
Drugs, of course.
It's a huge drug operation.
Yep.
But the thing is, it's the base is Mexico, Bill, but Hyman Larner runs the whole thing out of Panama. And I'm talking about the money side. He's running Panama would be the center of the money laundering, in all the banking that would be run through Panama. And I believe there's no doubt that the CIA is sanctioned this whole thing, and the elitists, and that's why Giancana's in this town being protected by those two entities. Because Bill, he's not kicking back to Tony Accardo. Okay, now that's a death sentence right there, and Accardo could have him hit Mexico, and it wouldn't really lead back to him. So he doesn't. Why would he not want to kick back, or why would he not? There'd be no retribution for this if he's being protected by the CIA. That explains it. You know, the other thing is, Bill, he has no problem with the Mexican drug cartels, which are rising to power at this time.
Right.
And here they are, Giancana, right in their backyard, running this huge drug and gambling operation, and they're just ignoring it, Bill.
Right.
So it's being protected, Bill. And there's no doubt at the time Richard Kane is working with the CIA. There's documentation to prove that. He's working with the on the Castro plots. He's brought in by Roselli. We talked about that. And he's also meeting daily with the CIA section chief in Chicago, a guy by the name of William Lohman. And there's a lot of documentation to back that up. So he also, you know, Richard Kane has connections to Paulina Sierra Martinez, which is a name you should remember, Bill, because he comes up in the Chicago plot to kill Kennedy. And he was the guy that met with Allen Dulles and General Lucius Clay, according to memo, in the summer of '63. So you see all these figures, Bill, you start to see this massive network. But it's really the way you have to look at this network, Bill, is you have to look at Sam Giancana and Richard Kane are kind of the muscle and the logistics guys running this. William Larner, or Hyman Larner, I'm sorry, he's the finance guy. So he's running it through the banks in Panama. And then the CIA and the elitists are kind of the umbrella of protection to protect this whole network. And let's talk about Hyman Larner for a little bit. So Chicago Tribune article in 2003, using a lot of informants as sources, said that Larner ran this whole network, this smuggling network, through the Panama banks, like I talked about. And it was conducted as a partnership with the CIA. And that's according to this Chicago Tribune article with informants as sources. Okay. Later, it developed into arms smuggling to the Middle East for the Israeli Mossad. And that gets into a whole other rabbit hole that I'm not going to get down right now. But wiretaps, Bill, pick up Larner ordering 7 Corvettes to be shipped to Panama for Christmas gifts for officials down there. Okay, so there's no doubt, Bill, he was running the money side of this. The article connects him, of course, to Meyer Lansky, which there's no doubt about. But also this article connects him to key players in the CIA, Bill, and 2 names that are very familiar to us, James Angleton and David Atlee Phillips.
Right.
Which they connect at every single point.
Right.
One of the main sources, though, Bill, for this article, and is a guy that I've done a little research is a guy by the name of Michael Corbett. Now, Michael Corbett was a police chief in Willow Springs, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. And he was on the take. He was a dirty cop. He was in with these guys, and he became a cooperating witness. And according to Corbett, Larner and Kane working with the CIA on the Castro hits. Now, I told you before, Kane definitely was working on those hits. There's no doubt about it. Larner, this is the first time I'm hearing of that, but probably the money side with him and Lansky makes more sense, that they were funding the money. So that part does make sense. Corbett claims the organization was also heavily involved in Jamaica. So you see, this organization is not just in Mexico, Bill. And he said that they cornered the gambling network down in Jamaica, and that Larner owned 2 racetracks, 2 casinos in Jamaica. And with Kane's help, he ran this huge car theft ring where they were stealing cars and selling them between the U.S. and Jamaica and throughout the Middle East. This is a huge car ring. And Larner's also smuggling raw opium from the Philippines. And according to Corbett, he ran tobacco smuggling in a prostitution ring in the Philippines. So you can see, Bill, this is a massive
Wow.
international organization
Yeah.
outside of Chicago's scope.
Wow.
Okay. And according to Corbett, the CIA was also using this as information gathering on all these countries they're dealing with, which makes a lot of sense. That's what they do. And they were running money and hiding in Swiss bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. And after Giancana's killed, Bill, I believe this organization didn't just disappear. I believe William Lardner continued to run this organization even without Giancana and Richard Kane, who was killed.
Hyman Lerner.
Hyman Lardner.
So what ended up happening with him?
Well, he was called to a couple of congressional committees that were investigating this, and he took the fifth. Right? He didn't answer no questions. He didn't know nothing. Right?
Right, of course.
And I believe he lived to about 90 years old, and I think he died around, I want to say about 07, 08, somewhere like that.
Really?
Yeah, like natural causes. So
Wow.
what happened to him? He probably continued to run this, through the banking system, and they got somebody else to run the logistics and the muscle work.
Wow.
So,
And Sean, just going back to what you were saying about the CIA, of course, being involved in all of this, and there's that quote that's attributed to Giancana, right, where he says that the Mafia and the CIA are the what is it? Both they're
sides of the same coin.
two sides of the same coin. Yeah, that's.
Yeah. Well, and this is where I think, Bill, like, and I know the book Double Cross has a lot of that nonsense in it, but this is where I think Giancana is right on this point, because I think this is more important. It leads to Giancana's suspicious death.
Yeah.
This, not the Kennedy assassination and not the Castro plots, which I think Giancana had minimal involvement in the Castro plots and nothing to do with the Kennedy assassination. And we're going to get into that deeper. So I think this is the reason when Giancana's called back to testify.
Yeah.
This is what they're afraid he's going to expose.
Right.
And that's my opinion on that.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Because this was a huge network, Bill. And we're going to talk about another network in a later episode of Santo Trafficante.
Yeah.
Ran a network in the Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia. And that network was massive, massive. So, and then, of course, CIA was heavily involved there as well.
Of course.
But let's talk about some of the myths, Bill. You have anything else before I go on?
Well, explain the whole thing with the McGuire sisters, because I don't understand all of that.
Well, Sam Giancana was having an affair with one of the McGuire sisters.
Okay. And they were singers. They were
singers. They were huge stars.
Huge singing group. Yeah.
Yeah. In that era, they were huge stars. And Giancana was having an affair. And she was having the McGuire sister that Giancana was having an affair with was also having an affair with another actor. And his name escapes me right now. But Giancana had Robert Mayhew bug that other actor to find out the truth. Okay. And this is where I talked about this on the Mayhew episode where they got caught because one of Mayhew's guys set up all the work, but then he went to lunch. Remember, he went to grab something to eat. And
right.
They come in, the hotel workers come in, they see all this, they call the cops. And then what happens is they have to protect it. They don't want, the CIA steps in and says, we can't prosecute anybody here. Mayhew's working for us. And this is where Bobby Kennedy found out about it. And he says, and he was ripping mad about it. And he said, shut this down because he's going after Giancana. And here he finds out he's working for the CIA and he wants it shut down. And we know it wasn't shut down, Bill. They didn't shut it down. They kind of just moved it from Roselli to Harvey.
Yeah.
Too.
Dan Rowan, by the way, was the name.
Dan Rowan, yes. He's the actor.
Rowan and Martin. That was they were, yeah. And yeah, that's.
And that's how that whole thing came about, you know? But they had electronic devices, Bill, planted in every Giancana meeting place. Like they had him under audio and visual surveillance. So before he goes to Mexico, Bill, there's not a lot that he could be getting away with. That's what people don't understand. Like he was so well, under heavy surveillance.
Hey, Sean, before we move on, I just want to mention our sponsor, one of our sponsors, DK's Corner, located in Jessup, Pennsylvania. Right on Cherry Street, 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania. Sean, I had a cheesesteak, and I know the ads always mention the cheesesteaks, and we've had a few listeners comment on that. I actually just had one yesterday, And
I thought you were on a diet. Bill.
I am. But I had to, well, the thing is, at work now, we've been ordering from DK's, and I keep smelling. Everybody's ordering these cheesesteaks, and I keep smelling them. So yesterday I broke down, and I had to have one.
It's all right.
It's just, I'll tell you what, Sean, just delish. I love DK's Corner cheesesteaks. Dave makes everything himself there. Everything is so fresh. All the food he makes is just incredibly delicious. It's such a really a great menu too. I mean,
it is, Bill. He gets really creative with a lot of the specials he has.
Yeah.
He has really good stuff, and his pizza's fantastic, but he always has incredible specials, Bill.
And there's always different things there that, you always have to make sure you check, go on, look on Facebook, DK's Corner on Facebook, because he's always got different specials, different things. He's
constantly changing the menu.
Constantly. And that's what, keeps it fresh, keeps everything good. Just want to make sure that everybody knows the hours have changed. So I know the ad that we've been running gives different hours, but his hours are now Wednesday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then he's open on Saturday from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. So he has breakfast. He has these breakfast bowls in the morning. They're delicious. Everything, like I said, everything he makes is great. He's got kind of a unique cooler in there with different sodas and stuff like that, different drinks. So make sure you call or stop by in Jessup. Again, it's 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania. If you're local here in Northeast Pennsylvania, make sure that you stop by and check out DK's Corner. Again, just delicious food, Sean. I know you order from there a lot too.
I order constantly from there, Bill, and so many times that I sent people there. My brother went there, loved it. I had other people. Nathan loves it there. It's just a great place. Sometimes I take it out. Sometimes I even sit there. It's really comfortable. But we get so many people, Bill, listeners and stuff that said, "Oh, I went to DK's and it was great." I can't tell you how many people. We just had a question episode where people were talking about it. It's just unbelievable place. So definitely check that out.
All right, definitely check out DK's Corner. Go to Facebook, look up DK's Corner. Again, he's located at 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania. Open Wednesday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Saturday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. DK's Corner. All right, Sean, let's keep going.
Yeah, so Bill, like I said, they have him under surveillance. And Bill Romer never heard nothing about them planning to hit on JFK, but he did hear a lot of the frustration of the gangsters on Giancana. So this is why he feels that Accardo did try to hit him, and that there was no involvement in JFK's assassination, because Romer would have heard about it, Bill. He had these guys. He had Giancana under so much surveillance. So that's why I think Giancana, had nothing to do with Kennedy's death. In some of these other rumors, Bill, of course, Marilyn Monroe comes up. There's no evidence that Giancana, other than stories from people like Gianni Russo and Jeannie Carmen and Double Cross, there's no picture to confirm. There's nothing to confirm a relationship, and of course it gets into the Kennedy crap and all that nonsense. But also we talked about this with Don McGovern. There's nothing to document or prove that the Mafia had anything to do with Marilyn Monroe's career. The guy by the name of Joe Shenick and Johnny Hyde were the two that really had helped Marilyn in her career, and they have no contact, no evidence. We talked about the actor Alex D'Arcy, who was friends with Giancana and Roselli. He said that Marilyn did not know them, did not want any relationship, any part of them. She tried to talk D'Arcy out of being friends with them because they were criminals. And then the William Sullivan memoirs, Bill, are so important. We talked about this. And Don McGovern identified witnesses, Bill, or people that were really in Marilyn's inner circle. And they all confirmed that RFK had no relationship with Marilyn Monroe at all. So all that nonsense goes away once you understand that, Bill, because William Sullivan even said, and we talked about this before, that Hoover had him trying to get any dirt on the Kennedys, and he couldn't get anything on Bobby Kennedy. He was like a saint. He'd follow him around the parties. He'd be drinking from the same glass of whiskey the whole night. So they did disinformation, and he admitted that. They put it in the files. They had assets like Frank Capel making stuff up. So once you understand, and they said, and Bill, this is confirmed by people in the inner circle, that JFK and Marilyn Monroe was a one-night stand at Bing Crosby's house. They didn't want any long-term relationship. Once you understand that, everything else goes away. once you understand Marilyn had no relationship with Giancana, nothing to do with the mafia, then all those conspiracy theories are just what they are, selling books and garbage. Okay, and then it leads to the Judith Extner stuff, Bill. We talked about her before. She says she was a courier for the Castro plots between Giancana and JFK, which makes zero sense, Bill. Zero sense. Because those plots started under Eisenhower and they're already run by Bob Mayhew. Why would they need her to be running messages? And then she says that Giancana actually met JFK in the White House. Do you actually believe that, Bill? He's under 24-hour surveillance and he goes and meets the president in the White House? I mean, and here's the thing, Bill. Exner wrote a book in 1977, and she never mentions the Castro plots. Okay, then in 1988, in People magazine, she mentions that. Like, did she just forget about that 11 years earlier and just happen to mention it? And, it just, this is what frustrates me about this whole thing, Bill. And then, Exner told about 4 or 5 different versions of her story, Bill. She even if, let's say, she did have an affair with JFK, it doesn't lead to anything else. It doesn't make all these other nonsense rumors true, Bill. So proving she had an affair with JFK does nothing, And she adds herself in the Giancana story and all that nonsense, and there's nothing to back that up. And now let's get to the big one, Bill. Let's get to the old man Kennedy myth. Do you have anything before I get into that?
No, I mean, we've talked about this before. I know that, you've done a lot of research on this. So why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so let's really get into this whole thing. Let's go deeper than we ever did, Bill. The myth is that old man Kennedy had this relationship back to bootlegging days. Sam Giancana and him were friends, which makes no sense, Bill, because I talked about Giancana wasn't even a high-level driver. He was just a low-level driver. I mean, and then later on, he would ask help rigging the elections, which after all his boys attacking the mafia makes zero sense. But Daniel Krent wrote a book about bootlegging, and he found no evidence of Joe Kennedy being involved. Joe Kennedy was congressionally approved, Bill, for 6 appointments in extensive investigations, over 800 pages, and not one thing of bootlegging. And the first 3 appointments came right after Prohibition. So you think something would come out, right? Because you know how extensive these are. They're turning over every rock to find, because it's the other side doing the work.
Right.
They want to knock this appointment down.
Right,
So
of course.
for everything they could find, and nothing comes out. And then the old man did get into the liquor business, but after Prohibition. And we talked about before, Bill, Daniel Joseph Kennedy. And let's just put this out there one more time so people understand. I first heard this from interview. Jim Diagino was on a podcast with this guy, Philip, I don't know, Italian name, I forget, but 10, 12 years ago, Bill. And Jim Diagino said that there was another guy named Joe Kennedy that was the bootlegger. So I started looking into this, and this is where I came across all those Canadians, Lawson, Vanderhill, Schneider. They did all this work on this guy, Daniel Joseph Kennedy, went by his middle name, born in the Midwest, extensive ties to Canada, under serious investigation by Canadian law enforcement. He was the one that was partners with Meyer Lansky, with Siegel, with Frank Costello, and with Oni Madden. It wasn't old man Kennedy, and it was this guy. And there's no doubt, Bill, I have no doubt in my mind, there's documentation to back up. These Canadian researchers did a great job. There's property records to prove this. This is the guy, Bill. It was not old man Kennedy. So once you understand that, all of this is crap. And then you have David Nassau's book, The Patriarch. He accounts for the old man's wealth at the time now when this was all going on, Bill. So let's go over old man Kennedy's wealth. He invested in the stock market in distressed properties. In 1919, at the beginning of Prohibition, he joined the largest stockbroker firm in New England, Hayden Stone. And at that time, Bill, insider trading was not illegal. I mean, it shouldn't be illegal now with the way the Congress uses it anyway, but I mean,
Right.
it wasn't illegal then. So he took the money from the stocks and from real estate, and he took his money into the movie business, and he formed this film distribution company. Okay, and he bought his own theaters all through the Northeast. And then he resigned from Hayden Stone to open up his own bank. This is before he's 30 years old, Bill. He owns a bank. I mean, I know people that are 50 that can't balance a checkbook. This guy owns a bank. And you're telling me he's going to have a relationship with the mafia when he has all this money? And he buys a home in New York. He has homes in New England. He buys another home in Beverly Hills. He has servants, chauffeur. He bought a Rolls Royce. He has his own driver. He doesn't need a low-level driver like Sam Giancana hanging around. But his film distribution company, Bill, he distributed 51 films in 1 year at a time when there was 20,000 theaters across the U.S. So add that up, Bill. And then he ran 3 companies with stock options. He had so much money, Bill, he bought the merchandise mart in Chicago for $12 million. Okay, so why would he get involved with gangsters when he has all this money? He doesn't need them. And this is what people don't understand, Bill. And then you get into the election crap, okay? Of course, we talked about that. They say that the Kennedys, the election was rigged by the mafia to get Kennedy elected. It's all from bad sources, Bill. And it's a lot of Nixon's people that brought that legend even further into the mainstream. But a guy by the name of John Binder, he did a lot of research on this. He checked into all the wards that were controlled by the mafia. Okay. And JFK actually underperformed in those wards that were controlled by the mafia. So if they did rig the election, they did a bad job. And we know that Marcello and Trafficante in New York, the commission, were supporting Richard Nixon. And we know that because Ed Parton, an informant working for Jimmy Hoffa, was at a meeting where Hoffa, there was an exchange of 2 bags of $500K each for Marcello and Trafficante and one from the commission for campaign contributions to Richard Nixon. Okay. And then, they have the West Virginia primary. That always comes up, that was rigged. Dan Fleming wrote a book, Kennedy versus Humphrey. It was an academic study. It found no evidence of any tinkering in this bill, in this election. Then the Ray Chafin book, Just Good Politics. He had a union member, a guy by the name of Fleming, who watched this whole thing from the inside as a union member. Okay, and he saw no evidence of effects or of the guy Skinny D'Amato, which is the Jersey gangster that double crossed, and a lot of these disinformation artists say that Giancana sent to West Virginia to rig the primary. Fleming did 100 interviews in shady underworld venues, Bill, and nobody knew it was Skinny D'Amato. There was no evidence to support this. And then, Bill, here's the kicker for me. This is the convincer for me. Barry Goldwater. Could you at that time have anybody that was more right-wing extreme than Barry Goldwater?
Right.
He did an investigation himself, and he hired former FBI officials to investigate. And they came back and they found no evidence that the election was rigged. So Barry Goldwater found anything, Bill. Do you think he would have brought it out? I mean,
of course he would. Sure.
And then the other thing, Bill, is even if JFK lost Illinois, he still would have had enough electoral votes to win the election. That's what people don't understand. They don't do the math. So this whole thing is a myth, Bill. And the last thing I'm going to say on that is the alleged meeting, okay, that happened between Sam Giancana and Old Man Kennedy. The information from that, okay, there's a lot of people that say this happened, but the original source of that information is a guy by the name of Robert McDonald, who is a mob lawyer. Okay, so you're going to back everything. You're going to believe a mob lawyer, Bill. Okay, a guy that makes a career of having clients that kill each other. Okay, but it's interesting, Bill. They use alleged mob lawyer to kind of discredit the RFK. The same people that believe this guy say that you can't believe Mr. Bates in California, that Robert Kennedy was at his ranch because he's a mob lawyer, even though he wasn't a mob lawyer. But they say you discredit him in that case, but in this case, it's okay. He's a stand-up guy. You believe him, right?
Right.
So anyway, he was an attorney for the Chicago Mafia. So he hated the Kennedys right off the bat because they're attacking his clients. Okay, so according to McDonald, Old Man Kennedy asked Judge Toohey to set up a meeting. And of course, Seymour Hersh, the Kennedy hater, interviewed McDonald. And of course, he's the same guy that interviewed Oni Madden and Frank Costello, and they told him they were in the liquor business with Joe Kennedy. And they were. just Daniel Joseph Kennedy.
The other Joe Kennedy.
Yeah, the other Joe Kennedy. So apparently, according to McDonald, they meet in Judge Tuohy's chambers, and people go all around to say that Kennedy knew Judge Tuohy. He probably did, Bill. That doesn't prove that this meeting happened. Joe Kennedy knew a lot of judges, and he knew a lot of politicians. That doesn't mean that this meeting happened. So, according to McDonald, Sam Giancana and an associate met with with Old Man Kennedy in Tuohy's chambers. Now, who's this associate, Bill? Because I've read stories where it's Johnny Roselli, it's Murray Humphreys, it's Gus Alex. And if there's a secret meeting between the two men, why would Old Man Kennedy want Giancana to bring an associate? It makes no sense. Okay. And then the other thing is they use McDonald, they say they back up that story what Frank Sinatra's daughter said. Okay. And they use that to back up McDonald. Now, here's what Frank Sinatra's daughter said. She said that that Old Man Kennedy called her dad, Frank Sinatra, and called him to a meeting, okay, at his house. And he said, I need help. I want you to go to the mob and ask for help because you could talk to those people. I can't be seen with them, but you can, Frank. So you go and tell them I need their help. But wait a second, Bill. Wait a second. I thought McDonald said he already met with Giancana. So you see, the
Right.
details are important, Bill. Details matter. They're everything.
And just to clarify, it was not Nancy Sinatra. This was Tina Sinatra, right?
Tina Sinatra. You're
Yeah.
right. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't Nancy. But anyway, Bill, it's like it doesn't make any sense. There's nothing to back up that. I don't believe Robert McDonald. I believe he had a lot of reasons to lie. So I don't think that story is true. And it doesn't make sense if you understand Old Man Kennedy's wealth. He had no reason, Bill. And he had other sources that he could go to get his son elected, Bill. He had so much power politically. He didn't need the mafia. So I don't believe any of that nonsense, Bill. I'm sure it's going to continue. But here's a question after you, Bill. Let's just say Old Man Kennedy did want to go to the mafia. Why would he go to Giancana and not Tony Accardo?
Right.
And you would think that if there was a relationship between any gangsters and Old Man Kennedy, it makes more sense that he would have a relationship with Accardo.
Right.
Because at the time of Prohibition, Accardo was high up. He was like the main bodyguard for Al Capone. So if Old Man Kennedy was doing business with Al Capone, it would make a lot more sense that he would know Accardo than a low-level driver who there's no chance that he would even meet.
Right. And plus, he would want to keep it hidden.
Sure.
He's not going to want to associate with a known member of organized crime. He's going to want to associate with somebody who people have no idea who he is.
No idea.
Right.
So then, let's get to the death of Sam Giancana. And we're getting ready here to a couple other things I want to talk about. Do you have anything else, though, before we go on to this?
No, let's keep going.
So Richard Kane set Sam up with a lawyer, Jorge Castillo, in Mexico. But the lawyer never gained Giancana permanent residence down there. So in 1974, his home there is raided. Now, maybe remember, he's under protection by the elitists down there, the CIA. Maybe he outlived his usefulness at this point. I don't know why. But anyway, his home is raided and he's sent back to Chicago. And when he gets off the plane, Bill, guess who's sitting there waiting for him on the tarmac? Is FBI agent Bill Romer sitting there waiting for him. And, he arrests him. He makes 4 grand jury appearances. And then he's called to appear before the church committee. And this is where it's really important. And then on June 19th, 1975, now he's under 24/7 surveillance, Bill.
Right.
The surveillance is called off. And we know that. And it's within that hour window he's killed, Bill.
And how long had he been under surveillance for? 24 hours?
From the time he got off the plane in Mexico, or so whatever months it was, from the time he got off the plane from Mexico to Chicago, he was under surveillance.
Yeah.
And it happens to be taken off, and within an hour he's killed. I mean, that coincidence takes a lot of planning, Bill.
Sure.
And now a lot of suspicion goes to a guy by the name of Butch Blasi, who was one of Giancana's bodyguards. He's seen at the house around 10:30, right before the surveillance is taken off. Giancana's killed while he's cooking sausages. The killer, 22 pistol with a silencer, they shot him in the back of the head, killed him instantly. but then they shoot him 5 times under the chin, under his jaw, Bill. Blasi's a suspect. He's supposedly seen by Giancana's daughter returning to the house. So he's the major suspect in this whole thing. Tony Accardo's name has come out lately. Guys in the outfit that turned informant recently said that they feel Accardo actually did the rubber glove work here, Bill, did the own hit. So nobody else would find out about it. The CIA has always been a suspect. 2 names that people try to say actually did the killing was Robert Mayhew and William Harvey, but I never know Mayhew to do his own rubber glove work. Same thing with Harvey. They always use somebody. Johnny Roselli's name comes up. Who knows who actually did it, Bill? But to me, it goes back to the CIA because that the only there's people that say, well, they could have got surveillance off by just calling in a bomb scare or something like that, or just get them away from the house. Those FBI guys are not leaving the scene, Bill. They're trained. They're not leaving unless their supervisors tell them to leave.
Right.
So this had to come from somebody very high up. And Romer's really sketchy on who took the surveillance off. I think the CIA put the pressure on the FBI to get surveillance out there because I think they were afraid of what Giancana was going to say at the church committee.
Yeah, it's not like they were wandering off to go grab a coffee, Sean. They were pulled over. Yeah,
these guys are not like the guys Mayhew hired to go grab a sandwich. They're watching Giancana. But the thing is, Bill, I think it had a lot to do with the town in Mexico and the operation that Giancana was running and the CIA's involvement in that. I don't think it had anything to do with the Kennedy assassination or the Castro plots, because the Castro plots were coming out at that time. People were aware of them. Giancana had limited involvement in that. And then with Kennedy, once you understand the election, all that nonsense is a lie. Marilyn Monroe, all that stuff is garbage. Giancana, I don't think had anything to do with Kennedy's assassination. He was under 24-hour surveillance. He didn't have time. He couldn't have planned anything without Bill Romer finding out about it. So I think this is the reason why he was killed, Bill, because that operation, that huge operation he was running. And that's my conclusion. Once you understand all this other stuff is nonsense, it's legend, it's myth, has no place in our story here. That's it. But I do want to talk about, I want to close now, Bill, with, let's briefly talk about Mad Dog Destefano. Because he really, this guy is a sick, I mean, he might.
I think we've mentioned him before, Sean.
Mentioned him, Bill, but we never went into detail. We talked with him with Steve Kopesky. But he makes the Westies and Roy DeMeo look like altar boys, Bill.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy was, so he was associated with the outfit. We talked about he was involved in the Action Jackson brutal hit. Accardo would never make him, Bill. And he would never be a made man because Accardo understood this guy is a problem. But again, this is where Tony Accardo, these guys always, what's the one thing, Bill, that always drives every decision? Money.
Money.
And the thing is, Giancana loved Mad Dog, loved him. And sometimes he's called Mad Sam, sometimes Mad Dog, whatever you want to call him. He's a nutcase. At 18, Bill, he's arrested for the gang rape of a 16-year-old girl. So you can see this guy's a bad guy right from the beginning. He's found guilty. He only serves 3 years. He joins the 42 gang, which was with Giancana, with those young teenagers, right? And he later becomes the top loan shark in Chicago. Now, Accardo takes a cut from that because the loan shark operation is huge. But he still doesn't make him because he doesn't want directly involvement with him. He knows he's crazy. And he also makes money as a bank robber, Bill. He was also a very capable bank robber. But the violence of this guy, there was a guy, Leo Foreman, who was a real estate agent who got caught up in he owed money to the mob. And Mad Dog, he loaned money for Mad Dog. He goes to collect. He doesn't have the money. So Mad Dog and Tony Spilotro, a name that you should know, he was Joe Pesci's character in Casino. They kidnap him and they torture this guy for days, Bill, almost like they did with Action Jackson. Then there was another guy, Pete Capoletti, who stole money from Mad Dog. Like how stupid do you have to be to steal money from this guy?
Right.
And Mad Dog takes him into a restaurant that he owns, chains him to the radiator, and they torture this guy for days, Bill. Okay, and they're torturing him while a banquet's going on in the other room. And Mad Dog's crew is attending the banquet. So they're going back and forth torturing this guy while they're attending this banquet.
Oh, my God.
Then finally, Mad Dog says, enough is enough. He has all his crew come in there to take a piss on the guy while he's tied to the radiator, bleeding to death, and then they finally just kill him. So that's what you're dealing with this guy. And then remember, I told the story before. Bill Romer tried to get Mad Dog as an informant, and he used to come to his house to talk to him. And he said he didn't understand why the coffee that his wife made him was so bad. It tasted so bad he couldn't even drink it. It was because Mad Dog kept pissing in it.
Oh, jeez.
Like that's how bad this guy was. Just but the worst story about Mad Dog though is he gets in a fight with his wife, okay, and he beats her up, and then he goes out on the street and he kidnaps a random guy, just the first guy he sees, kidnaps him at gunpoint, brings him back to the house, and makes him have sex with his wife repeatedly, over and over, and then he beats the two of them, almost killing both of them. I mean, this guy is so far.
Wow.
There was a cop by the name of Tommy Dorso who was involved. He was a dirty cop. He was in the drug business with these guys, and he said that Mad Dog used to roll around on the ground, Bill, and beg Satan to command him to kill people. That's how nuts he was. Like they said, he was in the satanic worship. I mean, who knows? This guy though. But finally, in April '73, Mad Dog is murdered. Had to be on Accardo's authority. Ricardo probably had enough, but that's still in that window, Bill, of these other guys getting killed. But I don't think that had anything to do with, CIA or anything, because Mad Dog, I think just Ricardo had enough. And who's the two guys that actually did the work, Bill, and actually killed Mad Dog? One was Tony Spilatro, and the other was Mad Dog's own brother.
Wow.
And according to legend, he volunteered for the job. So how bad of a guy do you have to be for your own brother to volunteer to kill you?
Well, this guy sounds like
he was
that guy.
Yeah. But anyway, that's Sam Giancana. And this is who Sam Giancana was very close to. So when I say that Sam Giancana was not this enormous, powerful boss, he was just a front boss, I'm not by any means saying he wasn't violent or vicious on the streets. And he wasn't, and he was very valuable when he goes to Mexico. So this is why I think he's chosen to run this operation, because he's so violent, Bill. And he has a reputation of running operations like the lottery in the black communities. And he's overseeing Mad Dog's loan sharking operation. So Matt Giancana could run an operation. So he's important to people like Accardo. He's important to people like the CIA. But you got to get through the Mets with this guy, Bill.
Right.
Hopefully, I hope I cleared up a lot of the garbage that's out there.
I think you did, Sean, because you do the research. Most people that spread these myths and stuff, they don't do any research.
Well, that's the thing, Bill. Even when we get somebody who we have Don McGovern's the best source of Marilyn Monroe, Jim D'Agino, Lisa P. Even when I use their work, I always try to back it up. I always do my own research. I don't take anybody's word for anything.
Right.
Do my own research, and that's important, Bill, because that's where you get to if Robert McDonald is your source, do you really believe a mob lawyer is going to tell the truth about a guy that he hates? That's why with the Roselli stuff, I didn't take all the people that were saying, I don't take Bradley Ayers. I'm on the fence about that. I need more documentation to believe him. So it's important to do your own research, Bill.
And by research, you mean you're talking about looking at official documents.
Yes.
You're talking about reading books. You're talking about looking at newspaper articles.
A lot of time
not going on Facebook and watching TikTok videos.
The only thing you're going to get on Facebook and Twitter, Bill, is a headache.
Right.
So I'm talking about actual research, which means books, data centers, or libraries, Bill. You go to them. There's a lot of stuff, the old newspaper articles, and the documents, Bill, the document dump. There's so much valuable stuff in there. I go through that. And like I said, the biggest one for me is the Canadian researchers, because I looked at a lot of their work, and I like I said, I backed it up with property records and everything else, and they're spot on this, on that Daniel Joseph Kennedy. They're spot on. So
yeah,
a lot of research goes into this, Bill. And
good job.
Bill, that's important is Bill Romer. I actually only said the stuff that I could confirm that Bill Romer, I actually heard him in interview say, or interview that was attributed to him directly.
Mm-hmm.
This guy said Bill Romer said this, or Bill Romer told this guy that. None of that nonsense, because that's where you get into the David Heyman making up phony interviews.
Right.
So I don't want to get into any of that hearsay. I directly source everything.
Yep.
So hopefully this clears it up, Bill. And I hope hopefully this is the best version of the closest to the true version of Giancana that you're going to get it.
Absolutely. Good job, Sean. Excellent research. Thank you very much. All right. Listen, if there's any questions, if you guys have comments, questions, if you want more information about this, let us know in the comments below. Give us a like. Hit that. Make sure you hit the subscribe. Sean, you got to hit subscribe, because if you're missing out on these shows, you could be missing a lot. Like,
especially, some of these episodes have 20,000 subscribers, Bill. There's 20,000 views, and we're still only over a little over 1,500 subscribers. So it doesn't make sense.
No.
Watch the episode, hit subscribe, and you see what we got coming up next.
Absolutely. You'll get notifications. And again, our Patreon. Sean previews our episodes on Patreon too. So if you're interested in what's coming up in the next few weeks, you'll be able to see that on Patreon. So, all right, guys, thank you very much. We appreciate your support. Sean, great job on the research. And we will talk to you guys next week.
Good night, everybody.
That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane, and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.